Karen Wetterhan. On August 14, 1996, Dartmouth chemistry professor Karen Wetterhan was working in a fume hood with dimethyl mercury, a highly toxic liquid used as a reference substance in mercury research. She wore the standard laboratory protection that was considered acceptable at that time: a lab coat, safety goggles, and disposable latex gloves. She pipetted a small amount of dimethyl mercury into a container for an NMR calibration. During this step, a few drops spilled onto the surface of one of her gloves. She wiped the glove and kept working. There was nothing to suggest danger. What she did not know, and what was not yet common knowledge in lab safety, was that dimethyl mercury can pass straight through latex gloves in seconds. The droplet on the glove had enough time to travel through the material, get to her skin, and begin its silent movement into her bloodstream. There was no smell, no burn, no pain, and no visible sign of exposure. When she finished the task, she removed her gloves and left the lab feeling normal. For several months, she lived without symptoms. She taught her classes, continued her experiments, and maintained her routine. Then, in January 1997, gradual neurological symptoms began: trouble walking, difficulty coordinating movements, and speech problems. Doctors ran tests and finally measured extremely high mercury levels in her body. By the time the exposure was recognized, the damage was permanent. She developed severe mercury poisoning and died on June 8, 1997, 10 months after the single brief spill. After her death, glove guidelines for this chemical changed worldwide. Dimethyl mercury was no longer to be handled with latex, and nylon laminate gloves became the new standard when anyone works with it. Jessie Gelsinger. On September 13, 1999, 18-year-old Jessie Gelsinger took part in a gene therapy clinical experiment at the University of Pennsylvania. The study was testing an adenovirus vector carrying the OTC gene. The goal was to see whether the virus could deliver a working copy of the gene to the liver. It was a phase 1 safety trial, meaning the study was not meant to cure him, only to measure safety and side effects of the dose. Jessie agreed to the infusion and was placed under medical supervision. Not long after the injection, his immune system reacted violently to the viral vector. His body treated the adenovirus like a large-scale infection. His temperature rose, his blood pressure changed, his liver enzymes spiked, and his blood began to clot in the wrong places. Within hours, a chain reaction of inflammation spread through his body. Doctors gave him medication and support, but every system continued to fail. Over the next 4 days, the reaction grew worse. His lungs, liver, and kidneys began to shut down. He was moved to intensive care and placed on a ventilator. Doctors tried to correct the damage, but the immune storm triggered by the experiment could not be stopped. On September 17, 1999, he died of multiple organ failure caused by the experimental vector dose. After his death, federal regulators halted many gene therapy trials and opened a deep investigation. The case became the turning point that forced stricter controls and reporting rules. What killed him was not a rare unknown hazard. It was a known immune risk that was underestimated and pushed ahead in a human subject before the danger was fully contained. Antonina Presnyakova. On May 19, 2004, 46-year-old virologist Antonina Presnyakova was working at the State Research Center of Virology and Biotechnology Vector in Russia. This was one of the few laboratories in the world licensed to handle viruses like Ebola under maximum containment rules. She was performing a routine experiment with blood from animals infected with Ebola virus. She wore a suit and gloves and followed the normal steps for a BSL-4 room. The work itself was not unusual for her. During part of the experiment, she handled a syringe that had been used with infected samples. As she adjusted the needle, it slipped and punctured her glove and skin. It was a brief stick, the kind of tiny accident that could happen in seconds when a hand is not held steady or when a motion is done too quickly. Once the needle pierced her skin, the virus had a direct path into her bloodstream. She cleaned the area and reported the accident, but there was no way to remove the virus once it had been injected. In the following days, she developed symptoms: fever, weakness, and the early signs of hemorrhagic disease. She knew exactly what those signals meant because she had studied the virus for years. Isolation and treatment began, but Ebola moves fast in the body. Supportive care could not stop the infection once it was established. She died soon after the exposure, Her death became a strict warning to every high-containment lab. Even with sealed rooms, positive pressure suits, decontamination tunnels, cameras, and checklists, a single, uncontrolled needle movement can undo all layers of protection in 1 second. The room can be safe, the building can be safe, but if a hand slips with a live syringe, no other barrier matters. Sheri Sangji. On December 29, 2008, 23-year-old research assistant Sheri Sangji was performing a transfer of tert-butyllithium in a UCLA chemistry lab. Tert-butyllithium is a pyrophoric chemical. It ignites immediately on contact with air or moisture. When handled correctly, it is moved under inert gas using glass syringes or cannula lines with strong mechanical stability. On that day, a plastic syringe was used instead. She wore gloves, but she was not wearing a lab coat. Under her gloves was a synthetic fiber sweater, which melts and burns when exposed to flame. She began drawing the reagent into the syringe. Mid-transfer, the syringe came apart. A stream of tert-butyllithium hit her clothing and air at the same time. The liquid ignited instantly. Flames ran up her sweater and sleeves faster than she could pull away. Other workers ran to help and tried to smother the fire and cover her with a coat. The flames had already caused severe burns over a large area of her body. She was taken to a hospital and placed under intensive care. Despite medical treatment, the burns were too extensive. She died on January 16, 2009, 18 days after the flash fire. Investigators later documented a chain of simple errors: using a plastic syringe for a pyrophoric liquid, not requiring a flame-resistant coat, and not enforcing full protective layers for that class of chemical. Nothing exotic caused the death. The science was ordinary organic synthesis. The mistake was treating a fire-prone reagent like a harmless solvent. One tool choice and one missing coat allowed the chemical to behave exactly as it always does, and there was no second chance. Beijing Jiatong University explosion. On December 26, 2018, 3 graduate students were running a lab experiment in the Environmental Engineering Laboratory at Beijing Jiatong University. They were working with a mixture related to landfill wastewater treatment. As part of the procedure, they poured magnesium powder and phosphoric acid into a mechanical mixer. The combination of magnesium metal with acid releases hydrogen gas. When hydrogen collects in a closed space, even a small spark can trigger an explosion. The mixer ran with its lid closed. As the blades turned, the metal surfaces inside scraped and struck the walls. That motion can create tiny sparks. Meanwhile, hydrogen was building up in the headspace of the mixer. In addition, the mixer produced a cloud of fine magnesium dust. Metal dust in air is explosive when ignited. With hydrogen, dust, friction, and a closed container, the conditions were set without anyone noticing. At some point during mixing, ignition occurred. A sharp blast tore the mixer open and sprayed burning material across the room. Magnesium dust burns at extremely high temperature. The flame front spread instantly. Windows blew out and the shockwave traveled through the lab. Emergency services arrived quickly, but the 3 students died inside the laboratory. Later reports called the event a preventable mistake. Hazard identification failed at basic levels. The students were allowed to run a reactive mixture in a sealed rotating vessel without gas ventilation, spark protection, or dust control. The chemistry behind the disaster was not mysterious. Hydrogen plus confined space plus ignition equals explosion. Magnesium dust plus ignition equals fireball. The experiment looked like wastewater research, something harmless by name. But once reactive metals and strong acid are placed in a machine that can strike sparks, the physics no longer care about the label on the project.